The biblical account of Joseph in Genesis is one of the most famous accounts in the entire Bible. Now, on the surface, the account of Joseph appears to be a story about family conflict, envy, betrayal, suffering, and eventual triumph. But what if hidden beneath the surface is something far greater? What if the life of Joseph was designed by God to serve as a prophetic portrait of the Messiah? A portrait that was painted nearly 2,000 years before Jesus Christ walked the earth. Viewed through the lens of Scripture, Joseph becomes a remarkable foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, while his brothers provide a fascinating picture of the nation of Israel.
20 shekels, not a piece more.
In silver?
Of course. Done.
What is it?
As the account unfolds, we'll encounter astonishing parallels that reveal how God's plan of restoration for Israel and salvation for mankind ultimately centers on Israel's Messiah. The deeper we look, the more remarkable the similarities become. As we'll eventually discover, this account points far beyond Joseph's own lifetime to themes of redemption, restoration, and even resurrection itself. In this first video, we'll follow Joseph from his dreams and rejection all the way to his imprisonment, uncovering some of the clearest foreshadowings of Jesus Christ found anywhere in the Old Testament. Now, as we begin going over the life of Joseph, it's important to keep in mind that Joseph and his 11 brothers are the ancestors of the Jewish people. And so with that in mind, the biblical account of Joseph begins with Joseph being the 11th of Jacob's 12 sons. Now, because Jacob showed favoritism toward Joseph, his older brothers became increasingly jealous and resentful of him. But the situation became even worse when Joseph began having dreams that foretold that one day he would rule over his brothers and that they would bow down to him. Now, when Joseph shared these dreams with them, their hatred only grew even stronger. And so let's read one example from Genesis 37. In Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 8, it says, "Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, 'Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf.' And his brothers said to him, 'Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?' So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words." Now, this may seem like nothing more than a family dispute between brothers, but Joseph's dreams and his brothers' resentment toward him point to one of the most important parallels between Joseph and Jesus Christ. You see, in the Old Testament, God promised Israel a Messiah. Daniel 9, verse 25, identifies this Messiah as the Prince. In other words, the Messiah would be the promised King of Israel. This is why when Nathanael, one of Jesus' 12 apostles, believed that Jesus is the Messiah, he said to Jesus in John 1, verse 49, he said, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." So throughout the Old Testament, God promised Israel a future kingdom and a future king who would rule over that kingdom forever. But when that promised king arrived, many of Jesus' Jewish brethren rejected him. In much the same way, Joseph's brethren rejected the very idea that Joseph would one day rule over them. Now notice what Joseph's brothers told him and what their response was in Genesis 37, verse 8. They said, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So those words reveal more than simple jealousy. They reveal a rejection of Joseph's future authority. And as we'll soon discover, that rejection becomes one of the clearest foreshadowings of Jesus Christ in how Jesus, being the prophesied king of Israel, would also be rejected by his Jewish brethren. What's even more remarkable is that Joseph's dreams eventually came true. But before that could happen, Joseph's brothers would take dramatic steps to get rid of him altogether. Now, as Joseph's brothers were tending their flocks far from home, their father, Jacob, sent Joseph to check on them. Now, this provides another interesting parallel because just as Jacob, the father, sent Joseph to his brethren, God the Father sent his son, Jesus Christ, to his own brethren, the Jews. But when Joseph's brothers saw him approaching them, they were filled with anger. In fact, they began plotting against him. Their resentment had grown to such a point that they even considered putting him to death.
Father sends you fresh food!
I say we kill him. I say we kill him. It's the only way to be done with him once and for all.
Hold your tongue. Don't even think it.
No. Simeon is right.
To kill him? Never. If it's to teach him a lesson, then throw him in a pit. But you don't spill your brother's blood.
Now, the parallel that's on display here is that just as Joseph's brothers conspired against him, the Jewish religious leaders also conspired against Jesus and sought a way to put him to death. Now, concerning Joseph, when Joseph finally arrived, his brothers seized him, stripped him of his tunic that his father had given him, and threw him into an empty pit.
You report on me, and it'll be the last thing you do!
Simeon!
I'll do as father instructed.
Simeon, stop it!
What doesn't go well? I bring it next!
Now, while Joseph was held in the pit, a group of Ishmaelite traders passed by on their way to Egypt. Now, seeing this as an opportunity, Joseph's older brother Judah proposed a plan. Instead of killing Joseph, they could sell him as a slave. The brothers agreed, and Joseph was sold for shekels of silver.
Ishmaelite traders!
No. They're the answer. Egyptian slaves don't escape. They pay for him. There's money in it for all of us, and no blood.
20 shekels, not a piece more.
In silver?
Of course. Done.
What is it?
Now, once again, the parallels to Jesus Christ are remarkable. First, Joseph's brothers stripped him of his special garment just before casting him into the pit. Likewise, Jesus' garments were taken from him just before his crucifixion. Joseph being cast into the pit is a picture of death and separation, foreshadowing Jesus' death on the cross. And when Joseph was later brought up out of the pit, it provides a picture of resurrection, reminding us of Christ rising from the tomb. And Joseph was also betrayed and sold for silver, just as Jesus was betrayed for silver. What's especially interesting is that the brother who suggested selling Joseph for silver was named Judah. Well, centuries later, Jesus would be betrayed for silver by a man named Judas. In fact, Judah and Judas are closely related forms of the same name. Now, another point is that Joseph's betrayal involved both his brothers and the Ishmaelite traders who carried him away into Egypt. Now, in a similar way, both Jews and Gentiles were involved in the rejection and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In both Psalms chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4, Scripture presents both Israel and the Gentile nations as participating in the rejection of the Messiah. After arriving in Egypt, the slave traders sold Joseph to an Egyptian official named Potiphar.
The boy's amusing. For a good price, I'll take him off your hands.
Have He wants it. Did you hear?
As Joseph served in Potiphar's household, something became apparent. The Lord was with Joseph, and everything that he did seemed to prosper. And Potiphar noticed this, and so over time, Joseph earned so much of Potiphar's trust that Potiphar placed him in charge of his entire household.
They say whatever he touches flourishes.
Is this true?
It is, my lord.
For Joseph, it appeared that life was finally beginning to improve. But another challenging chapter was about to unfold. You see, Genesis tells us that Joseph was a handsome man. And so as a result, Potiphar's wife became attracted to him and repeatedly attempted to seduce him. But Joseph refused her advances because he feared God and he refused to betray that trust that Potiphar had placed on him.
A good foreman would see. This is a special man.
Day after day, Potiphar's wife continued to pursue Joseph. Then one day, when she caught him alone, she grabbed Joseph by his garment and demanded that he lie with her. Well, Joseph immediately fled, but in his haste to escape, he left his garment behind in her hand. Humiliated and angry, Potiphar's wife devised a plan of revenge. Using Joseph's garment as evidence, she falsely accused him of attempting to force himself upon her.
Leave me!
When Potiphar heard the accusation, Joseph was thrown into prison. And so essentially, Joseph suffered the punishment for something that he had not done. Now, once again, we find remarkable parallels here to Jesus Christ. Just as Joseph was falsely accused despite being innocent, Jesus Christ was also falsely accused by those who sought to destroy him. Now, there's another possible parallel here as well. The Bible never explicitly tells us whether or not Potiphar believed his wife's accusations against Joseph. Personally, I suspect that he did not, mainly because Potiphar had Joseph imprisoned rather than executed, despite the seriousness of the accusation. Potiphar may have chosen imprisonment for Joseph to preserve the honor of his family.
How can you let him live? How can you humiliate me like that?
Wife. Anyone who knows Joseph also knows that if he swears by his God, he's telling the truth.
If this premise is correct, where Potiphar suspected that Joseph was innocent, then this is where this parallel emerges. Because just as Joseph was falsely accused before a Gentile ruler, Jesus Christ would also be falsely accused before a Gentile ruler named Pontius Pilate. And the Gospels repeatedly emphasize that Pilate believed that Jesus was innocent. In John 19 verse 4 and again in John 19 verse 6, for example, Pilate declared, "I find no fault in him," referring to Jesus. Yet despite believing Jesus was innocent, Pilate ultimately condemned him because of the political pressure surrounding the situation. And so if Potiphar likewise suspected that Joseph was innocent, yet imprisoned him anyway, then Joseph's experience becomes an even more striking foreshadowing of what Jesus would later endure. At this point, Joseph appears to have lost everything. Rejected by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. I mean, how could God's plan possibly unfold from here? One could only imagine the frustration that Joseph must have felt at this moment. After remaining faithful to God, he now finds himself sitting in a prison cell for a crime that he never committed. Yet even now, events are already being set in motion that will not only change Joseph's life, but the lives of his father, his brothers, the Egyptians, and even the surrounding nations. And as we'll soon see in the next video, some of the most remarkable parallels between both Joseph and Jesus Christ are still ahead. Be sure to subscribe so you get notified when we release our next video, continuing with the story of Joseph and his prophetic parallels of Jesus Christ.